When Kate Middleton felt the first sharp pain in her abdomen during a royal engagement in March 2024, she had no idea that moment would change everything. The woman who had stood beside Prince William through scandals, celebrations, and the weight of a crown would soon face her greatest battle yet, not against tabloid headlines or royal protocol, but against an enemy that recognized no titles, respected no bloodlines, and cared nothing for the millions who looked up to her. This is the untold story of how the Princess of Wales fought the fight of her life, supported by an unlikely alliance of royal protection officers who became her silent guardians, a family that rallied like never before, and a faith that would either break under pressure or forge her into something stronger than she ever imagined possible. Behind the carefully crafted public statements and the strategically timed photographs lay a raw, human story of fear, hope, determination, and the extraordinary people who refused to let her face the darkness alone. This is Kate's story, not as the world saw it, but as it really happened. Kate Middleton had always prided herself on being prepared for anything. 23 years of royal life had taught her to expect the unexpected, to smile through exhaustion, and to find strength she didn't know she possessed. But nothing could have prepared her for the moment Dr. Sarah Henderson looked across the pristine consultation room at the London clinic and delivered the words that would shatter her carefully constructed world. "I'm afraid the biopsy results show malignant cells, Your Royal Highness. It's cancer." The words seemed to hang in the air like smoke, visible but impossible to grasp. Kate felt William's hand tighten around hers, his knuckles white against her palm. She watched Dr. Deary. Henderson's mouth continued moving, forming words about treatment options and survival rates, but the sound seemed to come from underwater, distant and distorted. "What kind?" William's voice cut through the fog. "Always the practical one. Always the protector. Even now. Adenocarcinoma of the colon." "Doctor," Henderson replied gently. "We've caught it at stage 2, which means it hasn't spread beyond the bowel wall, but we'll need to act quickly." Kate found her voice, though it sounded foreign to her own ears. "How quickly?" "I'd like to schedule surgery within the next 2 weeks. Following that, we'll likely recommend chemotherapy as a precautionary measure." The drive back to Adelaide Cottage passed in silence. Kate stared out the window at the familiar Windsor landscape, watching ordinary people going about their ordinary lives. A mother pushing a pram. A man walking his dog. A couple sharing fish and chips on a bench. How strange that the world could continue spinning when hers had just stopped completely. William pulled into their private drive, but neither of them moved to get out of the car. They sat there, engine ticking as it cooled, both staring straight ahead. "We'll get through this," William said finally. It wasn't a question or a hope. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the same certainty he used when discussing state matters. "Will we?" Kate's voice was barely a whisper. He turned to face her fully then, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Not just love or determination, but a kind of fierce protectiveness that seemed to transform him from husband into guardian. "Kate, look at me." She did. "We will get through this. Whatever it takes, whatever we have to fight. We will get through this." That evening, they sat the children down in the drawing room. George, now 20, was home from university for the weekend. Charlotte, 18, had been studying for her A-levels. Louis, 15, had been complaining about rugby practice just hours earlier. Normal teenager problems that suddenly seemed beautifully, heartbreakingly trivial. "We need to talk to you about something important," William began. Kate watched her children's faces change as the seriousness of the moment registered. George straightened in his chair, his young face already showing the Windsor ability to prepare for difficult news. Charlotte reached for Louis's hand without thinking, a protective gesture that reminded Kate so much of herself at that age. "Mummy is sick," Kate said simply. "I have cancer, and I'm going to need treatment." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Louis, her baby, asked the question she'd been dreading. "Are you going to die?" Kate's heart shattered and reformed in the space of a heartbeat. "I'm going to fight as hard as I can to be here with you for a very long time," she said. "The doctors caught it early, and they have excellent treatment options." Charlotte was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. George looked stunned, as if someone had told him the sun wouldn't rise tomorrow. Louis just stared at her, processing this information that was too big for his 15-year-old world. "What happens now?" George asked, ever the responsible eldest child. "I'll have surgery first, then probably chemotherapy," Kate explained. "I'll lose my hair, and I'll be tired a lot, but I'll still be me. I'll still be your mum. Can we help?" Charlotte's voice was thick with tears. "Just by being yourselves," Kate said, pulling her daughter into her arms. "By letting me hug you when I need to, and by understanding if I need to rest more than usual." The family spent the rest of the evening curled together on the sofa, watching a film none of them really paid attention to. Kate memorized the feeling of her children's warmth against her, the sound of William's steady breathing, the way the lamplight caught in Charlotte's hair. These moments felt precious now, weighted with new meaning. Later that night, after the children had gone to bed, Kate stood in her bathroom staring at her reflection. She touched her hair, thick and glossy brown waves that had been her signature for decades. Soon it would be gone. Her body, which had carried 3 children and represented the monarchy at countless engagements, was harboring something that wanted to destroy her. The phone rang downstairs. And again, word was already beginning to spread through the complex network of royal staff, despite the strict confidentiality agreements. Kate could hear William taking call after call, his voice steady and professional as he managed the crisis that her diagnosis would inevitably become. She thought about her mother, Carol, who would need to be told in the morning. Her father, Michael, who still saw her as his little girl despite her royal title. Her siblings, Pippa and James, who had always been her anchors to the normal world. How do you tell the people who love you most that the unthinkable has happened? Kate made her way to her study and sat at the desk where she reviewed her royal engagements and wrote personal letters. Tonight, she needed to write something different. She pulled out a piece of her personal stationery and began a letter to her children, to be given to them only if the worst happened. Her hand shook as she wrote the first line. "My darling George, Charlotte, and Louis, if you are reading this..." She stopped. Put down the pen. This wasn't giving up. This was being practical. But not tonight. Tonight, she was going to choose hope. Instead, she pulled out her phone and did something she rarely did anymore. She scrolled through old photos. George as a chubby-cheeked toddler, covered in chocolate cake at his 2nd birthday. Charlotte taking her first steps in the Kensington Palace Gardens. Louis learning to ride a bike, William running behind him with his hands out, ready to catch him if he fell. Then she came to a photo from their last family vacation in Scotland. All 5 of them hiking up a hill, windswept and laughing. Kate remembered that William had asked a passing walker to take the picture. "For posterity," he'd said with a grin. Looking at that photo now, Kate made herself a promise. She would fight for more moments like that one. She would fight for the chance to see George graduate, to walk Charlotte down the aisle, to watch Louis discover who he was meant to become. She would fight for ordinary Tuesday mornings and Christmas traditions and bedtime stories and all the beautiful mundane moments that make up a life. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. Sir Clive Alderton, the principal private secretary, arrived early to discuss managing the narrative, as he delicately put it. Henderson called with pre-surgery instructions. The Royal Protection Unit quietly increased their presence around the cottage, though they tried to make it appear routine. But it was Detective Inspector Sarah Chen, Kate's principal protection officer, who provided the most comfort. Sarah had been with Kate for 3 years, a calm, competent presence who seemed to anticipate problems before they arose. She knocked on Kate's study door mid-morning and entered when Kate called out, "Ma'am, I wanted you to know that the team is fully briefed and prepared for whatever comes next," Sarah said in her straightforward way. "Medical appointments, hospital stays, anything you need, we've got you covered." Kate looked up from the stack of papers she'd been pretending to read. "Thank you, Sarah. That means more than you know." Sarah hesitated for a moment, then stepped closer. "Ma'am, if I may speak freely."
"Of course. My mum had breast cancer 5 years ago.
Went through chemo, lost her hair, the whole thing. She's completely fine now. Driving me mad with her gardening obsession, actually." Sarah's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing the woman beneath. "What I'm saying is, you're going to beat this. And we're going to be with you every step of the way." Kate felt tears spring to her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude for this unexpected source of strength. "Thank you, Sarah. Really." After Sarah left, Kate walked to the window and looked out at the gardens where her children had played for so many years. The daffodils were beginning to bloom, bright yellow promises of spring and renewal. She pressed her palm against the cool glass and made another promise to herself. She would see these flowers bloom again next year, and the year after that, and for many years to come. The fight was about to begin, but Kate Middleton had never backed down from a fight, and she wasn't about to start now. The morning of the surgery dawned grey and drizzly, as if the weather was reflecting Kate's mood. She had barely slept, her mind cycling through worst-case scenarios despite William's reassuring presence beside her. At 4:30 in the morning, she gave up pretending to sleep and made her way to the kitchen to make tea. She found Louis there, sitting at the kitchen island, with a bowl of cereal, still in his pajamas. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked gently. He shook his head, not looking up from his cereal. "I keep thinking about what you said, about fighting as hard as you can." Kate sat beside him, her heart aching at the worry in his young face. "What about it, sweetheart? What if fighting as hard as you can isn't enough?" His voice was small, vulnerable in a way that reminded her he was still just 15 despite his growing height and deepening voice. Kate reached over and took his hand. "Do you know what I realized last night, Lou? Fighting as hard as I can doesn't just mean taking medicine and going to doctors. It means holding on to all the reasons I have to get better. It means remembering every funny thing you've ever said, every time Charlotte has made me laugh until I cry, every proud moment I've had watching George become the man he's becoming. It means fighting for your dad, who still makes me feel like the luckiest woman in the world. The doctors will help my body heal, but all of you help my heart heal. And sometimes that's the most important part." Louis finally looked at her, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Promise me something? Anything. Promise me you'll remember that I love you, even when I'm being a moody teenager and complaining about everything." Kate pulled him into a fierce hug, breathing in the scent of his hair that still reminded her of the little boy he'd been. "I promise. But only if you promise me something too." "What?" "Promise me you'll keep being a moody teenager and complaining about everything. I want to hear every single complaint, every eye roll, every dramatic sigh about how unfair life is. Those are the sounds of you growing up, and I don't want to miss a single note." By 6 o'clock, the entire family was awake and gathered in the kitchen, nobody really eating the breakfast that had been prepared. The atmosphere was tense, with unspoken fears and forced optimism. George kept checking his phone nervously, as if the outside world might have some answers. Charlotte had braided her hair 3 times, a nervous habit from childhood. William moved around the kitchen with military precision, making coffee, checking bags, doing anything to keep his hands busy. The car arrived at 7 sharp. Detective Inspector Sarah Chen was in the front passenger seat, with another protection officer driving. A second car followed discreetly behind. The short journey to the London clinic felt like an eternity, and an instant simultaneously. "We'll be right here when you wake up," William whispered, as they arrived at the private entrance. "All of us," George added, his voice carefully controlled. "The whole family," Charlotte said, squeezing Kate's hand. "Even if I'm complaining about the hospital food," Louis added, with a weak smile that made everyone laugh despite their nerves. Dr. Henderson met them in the private surgical suite, along with Dr. James Morrison, the anesthesiologist, and a team of nurses whose competence was immediately apparent in their calm efficiency. Kate had met most of them during her pre-surgery appointments, but seeing them now, in their surgical scrubs, made everything feel suddenly, terrifyingly real. "We'll take excellent care of her, Dr. Dave," Henderson assured William, and Kate could see the surgeon's genuine compassion beneath her professional demeanor. The goodbyes were harder than Kate had anticipated. Each hug from her children felt like it carried the weight of all their shared memories and unspoken hopes. William's kiss lingered, his forehead pressed against hers as he whispered words of love and encouragement that only she could hear. As the surgical team wheeled her toward the operating theater, Kate caught sight of Sarah Chen standing guard outside the surgical suite. Their eyes met briefly, and Sarah gave her a small, encouraging nod. It was such a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of a promise. "You're not alone in this." The anesthesia took effect gradually, and Kate's last conscious thought was of the daffodils in her garden, bright yellow promises of spring and renewal. She woke up 6 hours later in the recovery room, groggy and disoriented. The first face she saw was William's, and the relief in his expression told her everything she needed to know before Dr. Henderson confirmed it. "The surgery went perfectly," the surgeon said, checking the monitors around Kate's bed. "We removed the affected section of bowel and 12 lymph nodes. Everything looked clean, no obvious signs of spread. The pathology report will give us more details in a few days, but I'm very optimistic." Over the next 3 days in the hospital, Kate discovered that being a patient was perhaps the hardest role she'd ever had to play. She was accustomed to being the one providing comfort and reassurance to others, not lying in a hospital bed accepting help with the most basic tasks. The pain medication made her foggy and emotional, and she found herself crying over things that wouldn't normally affect her, like a kind word from a nurse or the sight of flowers from well-wishers. Her children visited every day, bringing homework and gossip and the blessed normalcy of their teenage concerns. George entertained her with stories from university that carefully avoided any mention of parties or activities that might worry her. Charlotte updated her on her A-level preparations and the drama among her friends. Louis complained extensively about his mathematics teacher, exactly as he'd promised, and Kate found his familiar grumbling surprisingly comforting. Her parents, Carol and Michael, had driven down from Bucklebury the morning of the surgery and barely left the hospital since. Kate watched her mother fuss over flower arrangements and organize get-well cards with the focused intensity of someone who needed tasks to keep from falling apart.
Her father sat quietly beside her bed, reading aloud from the newspapers and carefully editing out any speculation about her condition.
The Middleton family has always been fighters, he told her one afternoon when she was feeling particularly low.
Your great-grandmother worked in a munitions factory during the war. Your grandmother raised 5 children during the Depression. Your mother built a business from nothing but determination and good ideas. Fighting is in your blood, Katie. It's what we do. Pippa arrived on the second day with a bag full of Kate's favorite things, her own pillow from home, the cashmere throw from her sitting room, and a bottle of her preferred hand cream. But it was the small, framed photo she placed on the bedside table that made Kate cry. It was a picture from Pippa's wedding. All the Middleton women together. Kate, Pippa, Carol, and Kate's Aunt Mary. 4 generations of strong women, all laughing at something Louis had said. For when you need reminding of your support system, Pippa said simply. Even more surprising was the support that came from within the royal family. King Charles visited personally, something that required significant security arrangements and media management. He sat with Kate for nearly an hour, sharing stories about his own health challenges and speaking with the hard-won wisdom of someone who understood the peculiar pressures of being a public figure facing private struggles. The monarchy has survived wars, scandals, and countless crises, he told her. But what makes it truly strong isn't its ability to project invincibility. It's its ability to show that even kings and queens are human, that we face the same challenges and fears as everyone else, and that we can overcome them. Your courage in facing this will mean more to people than you realize. Princess Anne arrived the next day with her characteristic no-nonsense approach. She brought Kate a stack of mystery novels and a thermos of strong coffee. Hospitals have terrible coffee, she announced, settling into the visitor's chair as if she planned to stay for hours. And you'll need entertainment that doesn't require too much thinking but keeps your mind occupied. Agatha Christie never fails. But it was Queen Camilla's visit that surprised Kate the most. They had maintained a cordial relationship over the years but had never been particularly close. Camilla arrived with a beautiful silk scarf and an unexpected gift. A small, leather-bound journal. When I was going through my own difficulties, Camilla said carefully, someone advised me to write down one good thing that happened each day, no matter how small. Some days it was just, the sun came out, or I had a perfect cup of tea. But it helped me remember that even in the darkest times, there are still moments of light. You might find it helpful. On her last day in the hospital, Kate received an unexpected visitor. Detective Inspector Sarah Chen knocked on her door during afternoon visiting hours, carrying a small package. I hope you don't mind the interruption, ma'am. I have something for you. Inside the package was a small silver bracelet with a simple charm, a daffodil. My grandmother gave me something similar when I was going through police training, Sarah explained. She said daffodils were symbols of new beginnings and hope. They're also some of the strongest flowers you can find. They push through frozen ground, survive harsh winters, and always bloom again. Thought you might like the reminder. Kate clasped the bracelet around her wrist, touched by this unexpected gesture from someone she was only beginning to know as more than just her protection officer. Thank you, Sarah. This means the world to me. There's something else, Sarah said, her professional demeanor softening slightly. The entire protection team wanted you to know that we're not just here to keep you safe from external threats. We're here for whatever you need, through all of this. Doctor's appointments, chemotherapy sessions, bad days, good days, whatever comes next. You're not just our principal, ma'am. You're family. As Kate was finally discharged and made her way back to Adelaide Cottage, she realized that something fundamental had shifted during those 3 days in the hospital. She had always known intellectually that she was surrounded by people who cared about her, but now she could feel it in a way she never had before. Love and support had revealed themselves in unexpected places, from expected sources and surprising ones alike. The pathology report arrived 2 days later. The lymph nodes were clear, confirming that the cancer hadn't spread. But Dr. Henderson still recommended chemotherapy as a precautionary measure, 6 months of treatment to ensure that any remaining cancer cells were eliminated. Kate sat in her garden that evening, wearing the daffodil bracelet Sarah had given her, watching her children play football on the lawn. The daffodils were in full bloom now, bright yellow promises fulfilled. She touched the bracelet and thought about new beginnings, about the strength to push through frozen ground, about always blooming again. The hardest part was still ahead. But looking at her family, remembering the support that had surrounded her in the hospital, feeling the weight of the bracelet on her wrist, Kate knew she wouldn't be facing it alone. And that, she was beginning to understand, might make all the difference. By her 10th chemotherapy session, Kate had developed what the nurses called chemo brain, a frustrating fog that made simple tasks feel monumentous. She would start sentences and forget how to finish them, walk into rooms and forget why she'd come, spend minutes searching for words that had always been at her fingertips. On particularly difficult days, she felt like she was watching her life through thick glass, present but somehow disconnected from everything around her. It was during one of these foggy periods that she received a phone call that would change everything. "Ma'am?" Sarah Chen's voice was carefully controlled, but Kate had learned to read the subtle variations in her protection officer's tone. This was serious.
What is it, Sarah?
There's been a development. Someone has photographs. Kate's blood went cold. Despite all their precautions, despite the private entrances and carefully planned routes, someone had managed to capture images of her entering the chemotherapy unit. How bad? Kate asked, sinking into the nearest chair. Bad enough. The photos clearly show you in a headscarf, obviously unwell. The photographer is shopping them around to the tabloids. Within an hour, Kate's drawing room had been transformed into a crisis management centre. Sir Clive Alderton, the principal private secretary, had arrived with a team of communications specialists. William paced the room like a caged animal, his usual diplomatic composure cracking under the weight of protective fury.
We can get an injunction?
Suggested one of the communications team. That just confirms there's something to hide, William snapped. And it won't stop the speculation. We could try to buy the photographs, offered another voice. Setting that precedent would be disastrous, Sir Clive replied. Every photographer with a telephoto lens would see pound signs. Kate listened to the debate swirling around her, feeling strangely detached from the crisis that concerned her most intimately. Finally, she spoke. What if we don't fight it? The room fell silent. William stopped pacing and stared at her. What do you mean? He asked carefully. What if we just tell the truth? What if we control the narrative instead of letting them do it? Sir Clive looked troubled. Ma'am, the palace has always maintained that personal medical information remains private unless there's a compelling public interest. But there is a compelling public interest, Kate said, her mind clearing for the first time in days. Not in the details of my treatment, but in showing people that cancer doesn't discriminate, that it can happen to anyone, even someone with access to the best medical care in the world. That it's possible to face it with dignity and hope. She thought about Rebecca Martinez and their conversation during chemotherapy, about the book her students had made, about all the other people sitting in treatment chairs around the world who might benefit from knowing they weren't alone. I want to make a statement, Kate said firmly. A proper one. Not some sanitized press release that reveals nothing. I want to tell people what's actually happening. The debate that followed was intense. Palace protocol had never contemplated such openness about a senior royal's serious illness. The communications team worried about creating precedents and managing public reaction. William worried about the children and the additional scrutiny such honesty would bring. But Kate had made up her mind. That evening she sat at her desk and began writing. Not the careful diplomatic language that usually characterized royal statements, but words that came from her heart and reflected her truth. I wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you, personally, for all the wonderful messages of support and for your understanding whilst I have been recovering from surgery, she began. Then, taking a deep breath, she continued with the words that would change how the world saw her. In January, I underwent major abdominal surgery in London, and at the time, it was thought that my condition was non-cancerous. The surgery was successful. However, tests after the operation found cancer had been present. My medical team therefore advised that I should undergo a course of preventative chemotherapy, and I am now in the early stages of that treatment. She wrote about the time it had taken to explain everything to her children, about the support of her medical team, about her determination to recover fully. But most importantly, she wrote about hope. For everyone facing this disease, in whatever form, please do not lose hope. You are not alone. The video was filmed 3 days later in the gardens of Adelaide Cottage, with Kate sitting on the same bench where she had told the children about her diagnosis. She wore a simple blue blazer and spoke directly to the camera, her shortened hair visible beneath a light touch of styling. William watched from behind the camera operator, his face a mask of controlled emotion. The children had chosen to stay inside during filming, but Kate knew they were watching from the kitchen window. When the video was released the following morning, the response was immediate and overwhelming. The palace switchboard was flooded with messages of support. Social media exploded with well wishes and personal stories from other cancer patients and survivors. The photographs that had threatened to expose her were forgotten in the face of her own honest words. But it was the letter that arrived 3 days later that meant the most to Kate. It was from a 10-year-old girl named Emma, whose mother was undergoing treatment for breast cancer. "Dear Princess Kate," Emma had written in careful cursive. "My mummy cried when she watched your video, but she said they were happy tears because she felt less scared. She has been sick like you, and I was worried she might die. But you look strong and beautiful, even with short hair, so maybe mummy will be okay too. I drew you a picture of a rainbow because rainbows come after storms, and maybe that means good things come after scary things." The drawing was taped to the letter, a stick figure with short brown hair wearing a crown, standing under a brilliant rainbow, with a sunshine face and arms outstretched. Kate showed the letter to her family at dinner that night. "This," she said, holding up Emma's drawing, "is why I needed to speak honestly. Not for the press or the palace protocol, but for little girls who are scared about their mummies and for mummies who are trying to be brave for their little girls." The decision to go public had an unexpected effect on Kate's own treatment experience. The final months of chemotherapy became less about hiding and managing and more about healing with intention. The nurses at the clinic told her that several other patients had asked to meet her, inspired by her openness to share their own stories. One afternoon, Kate found herself in what the staff had informally dubbed the Honesty Circle, a group of patients who had requested to have their treatments scheduled at the same time so they could support each other. Along with Rebecca Martinez, there was David Chen, a jazz musician dealing with lymphoma, Margaret Foster, a retired teacher fighting ovarian cancer, and James Wright, a young father with testicular cancer. "The strange thing," David observed during one session, "is that before this, I thought going through cancer meant becoming a different person, someone fragile or tragic or defined by illness. But talking with all of you, I realize it's more like becoming more yourself, more honest, more grateful, more aware of what really matters." "Yes," Margaret agreed. "I used to worry about so many trivial things. Whether my garden was perfect, whether my house was clean enough, whether I was keeping up with friends my age. Now I know that none of that matters nearly as much as I thought it did." James nodded. "My wife keeps apologizing for things that used to annoy me, leaving dishes in the sink, forgetting to pick up dry cleaning. I keep telling her I honestly don't care anymore. How can I care about dishes when she's the one dealing with my mood swings and driving me to appointments and keeping our family functioning while I feel terrible?" Kate listened to these conversations with growing understanding. Cancer had stripped away many of the things she had thought defined her: her energy, her hair, her ability to maintain her usual schedule, but it also revealed what remained when those things were gone: love, determination, faith, the connections that truly mattered. Detective Inspector Sarah Chen had become more than just Kate's protection officer during these months. She had become a trusted confidant, someone who understood both the public pressures Kate faced and the private struggles she endured. Sarah's presence during treatments had evolved into a friendship that transcended their professional relationship. "I've been thinking," Sarah said one afternoon as they drove back from the clinic after Kate's 15th treatment session, "about what you said before, about wanting to help others going through this." "What about it?" "There's a charity called Cancer Champions that I've been researching. They pair cancer survivors with people currently in treatment, providing peer support and practical advice. They're looking for a patron, someone who could help raise their profile and bring more resources to their work." Kate considered this. It felt like a natural evolution of the informal support network that had developed in the chemotherapy unit, a way to formalize the connections that had meant so much to her own healing. "Tell me more," she said. Over the following weeks, as Kate's chemotherapy treatments entered their final phase, she began exploring ways to turn her experience into something that could help others. The honesty that had characterized her public statement about her diagnosis became the foundation for a new approach to her royal work. Instead of the traditional ribbon-cutting ceremonies and formal visits that had filled her calendar before, Kate began requesting meetings with patients, families, and support networks. She visited cancer wards not as a royal patron offering gracious sympathy, but as someone who understood the strange combination of fear and hope that defined the cancer experience. During one hospital visit, she met a teenage boy named Marcus, whose acute lymphoblastic leukemia had forced him to miss his GCSE exams. Instead of offering platitudes about staying positive, Kate told him about the days when chemotherapy brain had made her forget the names of her own staff members. "The fog clears," she promised him. "I know it doesn't feel like it will, but it does. And when it does, you'll be stronger and smarter and more determined than you ever were before all this started." Marcus's mother later wrote to the palace, "For the first time since his diagnosis, my son talked about his future instead of just his treatment. He said if a princess could get through chemo brain and still give speeches, maybe he could get through it and still take his exams next year." As Kate's final chemotherapy session approached, she realized that her relationship with faith had also evolved throughout her treatment. She had always been religious in a conventional way, attending services and finding comfort in familiar prayers and traditions. But cancer had demanded a more personal, more desperate kind of faith. On the Sunday before her last treatment, Kate sat in the small chapel at Windsor, alone except for the security presence that was always with her. She had come here often during her treatment, sometimes to pray, sometimes just to sit in the quiet and remember that she was part of something larger than her immediate fears and struggles.
"Thank you," she whispered, though she wasn't entirely sure what she was thanking or whom. "Thank you for the medical care that was saving her life.
Thank you for the family that had surrounded her with love. Thank you for the unexpected friendships and the lessons learned, and the strength she didn't know she possessed. Thank you for the chance to help others find their own strength. But mostly, thank you for the reminder that even in the darkest times, there were still reasons to hope, still people to love, still ways to make a difference in the world." As she left the chapel and walked back toward Adelaide Cottage, Kate touched the daffodil bracelet on her wrist and smiled. Tomorrow would be her last chemotherapy session. And then, finally, it would be time to truly bloom again. The final chemotherapy session felt surreal, like the end of a very long, very difficult journey that Kate wasn't entirely sure she was ready to complete. She had grown oddly attached to the routine of treatment, to the forced slowness that had restructured her life around healing rather than obligation. Nurse Patricia Williams, who had been with Kate through every session, arrived with a small gift, a certificate marking the completion of treatment, decorated with hand-drawn daffodils. "Every patient gets one," Patricia explained, though Kate suspected this particular certificate had been crafted with special care. "It's important to acknowledge what you've accomplished. 6 months of chemotherapy is no small thing." The ceremony was attended by her usual treatment group. Rebecca Martinez had finished her own course 2 weeks earlier and returned for Kate's final day. David Chen brought his saxophone and played a soft jazz version of Here Comes the Sun in the treatment room. Margaret Foster had baked biscuits for everyone. James Wright, still in the middle of his own treatment, promised to carry on the support tradition they had established. "You started something here," Rebecca told Kate, as the IV was removed for the final time. "People ask to schedule their treatments together now, looking for the connection we found. You've created something bigger than yourself." But it was Detective Inspector Sarah Chen who provided the moment Kate would remember most clearly. As they prepared to leave the clinic for the last time as patient and escort, Sarah handed Kate a small package. "This is from all of us," she said, referring to the protection team. "We wanted you to have something to mark this day." Inside was a silver photo frame containing a picture Kate had never seen before. It showed her laughing with the treatment group during one of their sessions, clearly taken from a distance by someone with exceptional discretion. She looked happy in the photograph, genuinely joyful despite the circumstances. "When?" Kate asked, touched by the thoughtfulness. "Week 8, Sarah replied. "You were telling that story about Louis and the cricket incident. We thought you should see what we see, someone who found joy even in the hardest circumstances." The drive home felt different than all the previous trips back from treatment. There was no anticipation of side effects, no planning for difficult days ahead, no counting down remaining sessions. Just the strange emptiness of a major chapter closing. That evening, the family gathered for what Kate had privately designated as her last treatment celebration. It was nothing elaborate. Takeaway Indian food eaten in the living room while watching a ridiculous comedy film that made them all laugh until their sides hurt. But it felt perfect in its ordinariness, a return to the simple pleasures that cancer had taught her to treasure. "So what happens now?" Charlotte asked during dessert. "Now we wait," Kate replied. 3 months from now, I'll have scans to make sure everything is clear, and then we'll know for certain that this chapter is closed." "But you're better now, right?" Louis pressed, needing the reassurance that only absolute certainty could provide. "I'm in remission," Kate explained carefully, "which means the treatment did what it was supposed to do, and we have every reason to believe the cancer is gone. But we'll keep monitoring to make sure it stays gone." George, ever practical, asked, "What about your work? Will you go back to the way things were before?" Kate had been thinking about this question for weeks. The truth was, she wasn't sure she wanted to go back to the way things were before. Cancer had changed her priorities in ways she was still discovering. "I think I want to do things differently," she said slowly. "More focus on the causes that matter most to me. Less emphasis on ceremonial duties that don't really help anyone. I want my work to reflect what I've learned about what's truly important." Over the following weeks, as Kate slowly regained her energy and strength, she began planning what this new phase of her life might look like. Working with cancer champions had introduced her to the broader landscape of cancer support services, and she was dismayed to discover how many gaps existed in the system. Young adults with cancer often fell between pediatric and adult services, lacking age-appropriate support. Families struggled to navigate complex treatment protocols while managing work and childcare responsibilities. Rural patients faced additional challenges accessing specialized care. Mental health support was inconsistent and often underfunded. Kate began developing a comprehensive initiative that would address these systemic issues while building on the peer support model that had been so valuable to her own recovery. She called it Circles of Care, reflecting both the importance of community support and the ongoing nature of cancer survivorship. The first public appearance of Kate's post-treatment career was a visit to the Children's Cancer Ward at Great Ormond Street Hospital. She had specifically requested to meet with teenage patients, knowing from her conversations with Marcus how challenging it was for young people to find their place in predominantly adult treatment environments. She arrived wearing a simple blue dress and a silk headscarf that covered her slowly growing hair, but it was her approach that felt revolutionary. Instead of the formal walkabouts and carefully scripted conversations that typically characterized Royal Hospital visits, Kate asked to spend extended time with each patient, sharing her own experience and listening to theirs. 16-year-old Aisha Rahman was undergoing treatment for bone cancer and had been struggling with the isolation of missing school and normal teenage activities. Kate sat with her for nearly an hour, comparing notes on the challenges of chemotherapy brain and the strange experience of watching your body change in ways you couldn't control. "The hardest part for me wasn't the physical stuff," Kate confided. "It was feeling like I wasn't myself anymore. Like cancer had somehow erased the person I used to be." "Yes," Aisha exclaimed. "Everyone keeps saying you're so strong and you're so brave, but I don't feel strong or brave. I feel confused and angry and scared." "That's normal," Kate assured her. "And it's okay to feel all of those things. Strength doesn't mean not feeling scared. It means feeling scared and doing what you need to do anyway." The conversation was overheard by other patients and families, and before long, Kate found herself in an impromptu group discussion about the emotional challenges of cancer treatment. It was exactly the kind of honest, meaningful interaction she had hoped to create. Dr. Emma Thompson, the ward's lead pediatric oncologist, later told Kate, "I've never seen anything like it. These kids opened up to you in ways they rarely do with medical staff. There's something powerful about hearing from someone who's been where they are and come through it." As spring turned to summer, Kate's hair grew back in soft waves that were lighter than her original color, but somehow suited her new perspective on life. She felt stronger than she had in months, her energy returning gradually, but steadily. The 3-month scan results were clear, confirming what everyone had hoped but no one had dared assume. "Cancer-free, Dr. Wyde," Henderson announced with a smile that matched Kate's own. All clear. The celebration this time was bigger. The children had planned a surprise party, complete with a cake decorated with yellow daffodils and handmade banners declaring, "Mum beat cancer." The extended family gathered at Adelaide Cottage, along with several members of the medical team who had become friends over the months of treatment. But it was the presence of Rebecca Martinez, David Chen, Margaret Foster, and James Wright that made the celebration feel complete. These were the people who had shared the journey most intimately, who understood what this moment represented. "To Kate," David proposed, raising his glass of champagne, "who taught us that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and choosing hope anyway." "To all of us," Kate countered, "who proved that the hardest battles are easier when you don't fight them alone." Later that evening, as the guests had gone home and the children were finally in bed, Kate and William walked through their gardens in the warm summer twilight. The daffodils that had bloomed during her surgery were long gone, replaced by roses and lavender and the lush green growth of high summer. "Do you remember when we used to worry about the normal things?" William asked, reaching for her hand. "Whether the children were getting good grades, whether we were managing our public duties properly, whether we were giving them enough privacy. I remember thinking those were the biggest problems we'd ever face," Kate replied. "Now they seem almost quaint." "What would you tell someone just starting this journey?" William asked. Kate considered the question as they walked past the place where she had sat on the bench to film her public statement, past the kitchen window where her children had watched nervously on so many difficult days. I'd tell them that cancer will change everything about your life, but it doesn't have to ruin everything about your life, she said finally. I'd tell them that the person they are underneath all the fear and uncertainty and physical discomfort is still there, and might even be stronger than they realize. I'd tell them that accepting help isn't giving up, it's being smart. And I'd tell them that it's okay to hope, even when hoping feels dangerous. They had reached the far end of the garden, where a new bed of daffodil bulbs had been planted earlier that week. By next spring, Kate's first full year of being cancer-free, they would bloom into the yellow promises of renewal that had sustained her through the darkest months. "There's something I want to tell you," Kate said, turning to face William. "Something I've been thinking about a lot lately." "What's that?" "I used to think that the worst thing that could happen to our family was if something happened to me. Cancer taught me that the worst thing would actually be if I wasted the time I have, if I lived in fear instead of living with purpose. This experience hasn't just been about surviving cancer. It's been about learning how to really live." William pulled her close, and they stood together in the gathering darkness, surrounded by the garden that had witnessed their family's greatest challenge and their greatest triumph. 6 months later, Kate stood before an audience at the first annual Circles of Care conference, addressing an auditorium full of cancer patients, survivors, caregivers, and medical professionals. Her hair had grown back completely, styled in the shorter cut that had become her new signature. The daffodil bracelet Sarah had given her still circled her wrist, now joined by a simple gold band engraved with the date of her final treatment. "When I was diagnosed with cancer," she began, "I thought the fight was about defeating a disease. What I learned is that the fight is about choosing hope over fear, connection over isolation, and purpose over despair. The cancer may be gone from my body, but the lessons it taught me about what matters most, those are permanent." She spoke about the importance of peer support, about the need for systemic changes in cancer care, about the power of honest conversation to break down the isolation that can be as damaging as the disease itself. But mostly, she spoke about resilience, not as an individual achievement, but as a collective effort that required community, compassion, and the courage to be vulnerable with each other. "Daffodils," she concluded, touching her bracelet, "are some of nature's most resilient flowers. They survive harsh winters, push through frozen ground, and bloom again every spring, often in even greater numbers than the year before. That's what I've learned about the human spirit through this experience. We may face seasons of darkness, but we have the capacity not just to survive them, but to bloom again more beautifully than ever before." As the audience rose in sustained applause, Kate spotted familiar faces throughout the auditorium. Rebecca Martinez was there with her daughter, both wearing yellow daffodil pins. David Chen sat with his wife and teenage sons. Margaret Foster had brought several of her former students, now adults with children of their own. James Wright, finally cancer-free himself, was recording the speech to share with the online support group he had created. And in the back of the auditorium, Detective Inspector Sarah Chen stood with several other members of the Royal Protection Team. No longer just guards, but friends who had chosen to attend on their own time because they wanted to witness this moment of triumph. After the conference, Kate returned to Adelaide Cottage as the sun was setting on a crisp October evening. The children were home for dinner, full of stories about their own days and plans for the weekend. William was already in the kitchen, attempting to cook something that smelled suspiciously like it might require the intervention of takeaway menus. It was wonderfully, perfectly ordinary. The kind of evening that might have felt routine before cancer, but now felt like a gift to be treasured. Kate stepped outside to check on the daffodil bed she had planted the year before. The bulbs were dormant now, gathering strength underground for their spring emergence. But knowing they were there, knowing that in a few months they would push through the soil into the light, filled her with the same sense of hope and renewal that had sustained her through the hardest year of her life. She touched her bracelet one more time and whispered a prayer of gratitude, for second chances, for the people who had carried her through her darkest moments, and for the reminder that even in the deepest winter, spring was always waiting to bloom again. Kate's battle against cancer, how faith, family, and the Royal Guard kept her strong,